All right, confidentiality of information. I refer you to Model Rule of Professional Conduct 1.6. Goes into great detail about this. And the thing you need to understand, obviously, about confidentiality is it's a bedrock principle in our practice. Clients need to be able to feel that their discussions with their lawyer is going to stay within the confines of that relationship, that no one else could interfere and obtain that information. It allows them to speak freely. It allows the lawyer to provide good advice. Without confidentiality, the whole system is just not going to work. So it's very, very important. The thing that I would point out to new lawyers is that no formal relationship is really required to trigger this confidentiality. In other words, the client doesn't have to pay you. There doesn't have to be any formal retainer agreement. If someone approaches you, and this happens especially if you're in a practice where you provide free consultations. Okay, so a client comes in, is frank, tells you their situation, you give them your best advice, you give them a fee quote, and they never return again. That information, that discussion is just as confidential as any other situation where you are retained. So it doesn't matter if you've been formally retained or represent to the world that you represent this person. If this person came to you as a lawyer and was seeking your advice and you provided that advice, that conversation is confidential. Now, confidentiality of information and confidentiality in general is different from privilege. The attorney-client privilege is more of a litigation item. In other words, if the client has some kind of a document that he or she provided to you to obtain your advice, it's a privileged document. If discovery is requested of that document, you raise the privilege. It's given genesis when there's a request made. Confidentiality of information is much more broad than just that. So it's different than the privilege. Now, again, the issue of informed consent can come up. If there's a confidential situation and you want to be able to reveal that, you can go to your client and they can waive that. Now, I remember a story. I couldn't have been out of law school more than a year. And I had a client that I did. It was a business client. I did some work for this client. And somehow his name got involved in a criminal proceeding, a criminal investigation, which had nothing to do with what I was representing him on, and it really had nothing to do with him to begin with, but there was an investigation and they were looking at him. And I got a subpoena from the district attorney's office that I had to testify before the grand jury and tell the grand jury information that I obtained in my conversations with this client. Now, I'm out of law school a year. So obviously, the first thing I did, I went to the law library, I studied it, I talked to other criminal attorneys, and I got in front of a judge and the district attorney. And luckily, what I did is I went to the client and I said, look, this is what they're looking at you for this particular thing. They want to know about this that you told me about. And luckily, in that case, the client said, I had nothing to do with this. I don't care. Tell them whatever you want to tell them. I put it down in writing. He signed it. I went back to the judge with the district attorney and said, I have informed consent. I have a waiver, and I can tell you, and when I told them what they wanted to know, it was pretty clear that he had nothing to do with this. He was never indicted. He had nothing to do with it. But the point was, he saved the day by providing me. Remember, the privilege, the confidentiality belongs to the client, not you. So the client can say, yeah, I understand that that's privileged. I understand that I don't have to tell you that you can reveal this, but go ahead, get it in writing. The other exceptions to confidentiality involve death, the threat of death, the threat of seriously bodily injury, or the prevention of crimes. If the subject of what you're considering to be confidential involves those things, there may be an exception and you may have to give that information. So those are some of the things that you should keep in mind regarding confidentiality of information and confidentiality in general.